Child soldiers can be individually responsible for their crimes.
Child soldiers should not be held accountable for their crimes.
The American Religious Town Hall meeting is now in session.
Welcome, friends, to the American Religious Town Hall meeting, where the discussion of religious, political, and social issues is meant to promote the cause of religious freedom and to help us better understand each other. And now, here's your host and moderator, Pastor Jerry Lutz.
Thank you, Mark, and I'm glad that you have all tuned in for today's program. I think you're going to find this particular program of great interest, as you heard in the opening remarks. But before we get started with today's program, I'd like for you to meet all of our panelists, and I want to thank them in advance for being here today. Let's begin with the gentleman to my right.
Hello, I'm John Robert Skeldon, a priest of the Catholic Diocese of Fort Worth. I serve at St. Patrick's Cathedral in downtown Fort Worth, Texas.
I'm Rabbi Jordan Offsire. I live in Palm Springs, California. I am now retired, but actively teaching and preaching and involved in the concerns of my community.
I'm Tom Plumley. I'm the senior minister at First Christian Church in Fort Worth, Texas. Our congregation is a part of the Christian Church Disciples of Christ.
I'm Andrea Luxton. I'm the president of Andrews University in Michigan, which is affiliated with the Seventh-day Adventist Church.
My name is Canon John Peterson. I'm an Episcopal priest in the Episcopal Diocese of Washington.
Hi, I'm Carl Trovall. I'm Dean of the College of Arts and Sciences at Concordia University in Austin, Texas, a university affiliated with the Lutheran Church Missouri Synod.
Well, thank you everyone for being here today and for you to tune in to watch this program. We're going to get right to our program, so let's do that. In January of 2017, the International Criminal Court in The Hague began the trial of Dominic Ongwen, age 41, a commander in the notorious Lord's Resistance Army, a terrorist Christian group that has operated for decades in Central Africa. Ongwen and other LRA leaders were indicted a decade ago for dozens of war crimes and crimes against humanity, including rape, mass murder, forced recruitment of child soldiers, and the use of sex slaves. He gave himself up in early 2016 in what was considered a major victory for the cause of human rights and a sign of the defeat and breakup of the LRA. One of the interesting things about this trial is that Ongwen himself was a child soldier. He was abducted nearly 30 years ago when he was on his way to school. Forced through violent rituals of indoctrination, gradually he began to take part in those acts himself. He rose through the ranks to become one of the group's central leaders. Even so, there are reports that he tried several times to escape, but was caught and punished. Though the LRA is universally despised, even in the region of Uganda where it first arose, reactions to Ongwen's trial are mixed. Western human rights groups and many in Central Africa have advocated that he should be punished by spending the rest of his life in prison. However, many, including several prominent church leaders, have argued that Ongwen should be tried at home in Uganda and forgiven through a traditional African system of reconciliation and victim compensation. Much of the argument for forgiveness arises from those who see Ongwen as a victim himself. Other critics argue that the punitive Western system is the problem and that a justice system centered on restorative justice is to be preferred. Dominic Ongwen may be the first former child soldier to be brought to trial for war crimes which he, at least at some point, was forced to commit. But he will not be the last. So what is the international community to do about such things? That's what we'd like our panelists to consider today. And here are some questions. What is the moral culpability of a person forced into committing atrocities as a child? Another question, at what point does a crime victim become a war criminal? And then finally, are there other criminal justice systems besides Western adversarial system that are better at providing both justice and reconciliation between victims and offenders. That is our topic for today. It's a deep one. It's an important one. Let's go back to those who began our program with opening remarks. And for that, we go back to Rabbi Ofsire. Welcome to the program. And some more thoughts on the subject, please.
Thank you. I would begin by suggesting, as a brief intro to my perspective, that there is no one-size-fits-all for this terrible, terrible reality. There is certainly a point at which people begin to be responsible for their own actions, but probably not before. And what's very, very difficult for all of us is to try to ascribe blame to something that's unimaginable to us and that we couldn't find ourselves in that position. I think that's a very strong part of all of this. And the only suggestion that I make is that with these so-called child murderers, the decision of what to do needs not to be on a one-size reality, but rather it needs to be judged individually to know the circumstances that led up to that person in his lifetime, and taking into consideration both the beginning of the process and the end of the process, because every human life is sacred. In this case, not only of those that were killed, but also the one who was being accused while he was a child.
Okay, thank you very much. Now let's go to Reverend Plumley. You were saying that they should not be prosecuted or put in prison, or what should be done with child war criminals?
Well, I think it's a very interesting question. It reminds me of an issue that was very prominent in the news when I was in college, the case of Patty Hearst, who had been kidnapped by a group called the Symbionese Liberation Army, and was shown in several pictures to have been holding a machine gun in front of the Symbionese Liberation Army flag, and videos of security cameras showing her being involved in a bank robbery. She ended up being convicted of bank robbery, but then her sentence was commuted by President Carter, who was president at that time. Very interesting case. This case of Ongwen being the first of the child soldiers to be tried, I think raises a really interesting issue. One of the Anglican bishops in Uganda, a fellow by the name of Ochola, Bishop Ochola has lost his wife and his daughter in violence perpetrated by some of these child soldiers, or some of these groups that are filled with child soldiers. And still, he is the primary voice, at least in Uganda, against the prosecution of Ongwen. He has come out and indeed said that punishment of him would be wrong because the children, these children who have been taken away like that, have had their humanity destroyed. And I think that's a very interesting argument, and one that we're going to see, we're going to have to face many times. And I think that perhaps there are other systems for dealing with this kind of crime that need to be developed. What some of the people in Africa are looking at is a different way besides our adversarial justice system, taking all that adversarial nature out of it and going back to some of the tribal customs that they've had, where people look at each other, admit their crime, beg forgiveness, make some sort of reconciliation, pay some sort of fee or fine to those who have been hurt by your actions. That kind of thing, rather than our system, which always leads someone to have to deny their own guilt in order to keep from being executed.
All right, thank you very much. We're off to a great start. Across the table from you is Dr. Luxton. Glad you're here with us today. What is your perspective on this issue, please?
I'd like to follow off to start with on this concept of maybe moving outside our normal Western system of thinking. Slightly different situation, but I think it plays into this conversation. A number of years ago, I was traveling, and I was in a Pacific island. The headline news when I got there was about a tribe that felt they were under a curse because they had cannibalized a missionary some time before. And so the tribe had invited the whole of the family there so they could go through a reconciliation service with them, which they hoped would lift the curse. And my initial thing was, really? Would the family go back for that? And then I thought, you're thinking through your Western eyes here. The way they are seeing the situation is very different.
You not only killed my friend, my father,
But
you
ate
him.
And now you want me to come over there and visit you. But it's an interesting dynamic. Then I think just after that I read a book by Ishmael Bey, I think it's Bey or Bai, A Long Way Gone, and he was a child soldier. Very, very moving book of his experience being a child soldier and also moving in the healing beyond that point in time. And he's now become an advocate and so on for child soldiers. And again, I felt, I don't understand this. I don't understand the frame. I don't understand the child. He was definitely a victim. And then he became a perpetrator. What do you do with that? So I think that there has to be a sense of responsibility somehow. But maybe delivery of justice is not through our normal means.
Thank you. And Kenneth Peterson, welcome to the program. Your perspective, please.
Well, I think this is a very difficult subject. And I think it's difficult because we're sitting around this table in Dallas, Texas, thinking about this in the context of our own systems and not being able to really appreciate a system that is radically different from ours. I don't pretend to understand this, but I do know the work that Desmond Tutu did and the Truth and Reconciliation Commission of South Africa, and how important it was for that commission to work to be able to deal with not only the person who was the victim, but also the perpetrator.
Their healing.
And the healing that took place. But it was a two-way street. The problem, as Archbishop Tutu speaks about, is that so oftentimes the perpetrators would not deal with the issues. Basically, the white person was not, and that the blacks were willing to talk about it and to try to work out in a situation of reconciliation and a restorative justice. And so I think it's very difficult for us who really cannot think in those types of categories to be able to deal with a subject like this. What I would say is that I think that this particular with Ongwen is more complicated simply because he started off, he was captured and he was one of the victims, but then he became the person who perpetrated. And, to what is the justice going to be done? Is there going to be justice because he was a young person who murdered many people, mass murders, or is it a situation that he then was instructing that to go on? And so I think that we have lots of complications. In other words, I'm not sure at all whether or not the Western adversarial system is a fair system to be able to use here, and I can understand why the church is raising, as well as the people are raising these types of issues.
Thank you. Let's come up to Father Skeldon. Your thoughts on the matter, please.
Well, again, it's great to be here. This is a very thought-provoking topic. Much is going through my mind, as I'm sure all of us. As Canon Peterson was talking, I was sort of thinking about all of those things that think of perhaps, for example, white people that grew up in the pre-civil rights South, racists of different bents, right? White supremacists. I mean, this is going to affect a lot of a wide swath of, because if people grow up matriculating, if you will, or inculcated by various thought patterns in their society and things like that, like South Africa, the whites in South Africa, for example. If we are products of our environment, then, I mean, this goes to whole big questions of, freedom and determination, or, a whole sorts of issues like that. And frankly, I do think that there's, we all have a context. I would also agree that I think the Western system is just poor to handle this particular situation, because I think it may actually need something far more, instead of adversarial, far more personal, right? Relational, a la the Truth and Reconciliation Committee in South Africa. But I think we could then begin to see it, this really does affect so many different situations across the world, in particular where people have sort of grown up with a mindset of disdain for, hatred of the other, whoever they might be.
All right, thank you very much. And Dr. Trovall, we've yet to hear from you. Thank you.
We've covered a lot of ground here, and I think the only thing I would want to add would be that I really think that those people in this area of Africa, Uganda, those are the people who really ultimately have to live with the consequences. And so it strikes me as being wise that we allow them to use their system to bring reconciliation to that community. And that may be naive on my part, but nevertheless, that feels instinctively true to me, that people do have those resources. And I think the other piece is that we've talked about the Western adversarial. In the Western tradition, there is also a reconciling. I mean, there is that also in our legal system. In fact, there are our criminal justice professor at Concordia. I mean, he's a lawyer and a criminal justice professor who's committed to reconciliate the restorative justice, and that this even works to solve issues here in the United States. And so it is a very powerful system that's been demonstrated to work. And I think New Zealand's a good example of that, where it's been put to extensive practice.
You mentioned the term justice, and I think that may be one of the central issues, if not the central issue in this particular matter. What is just? And then who decides what that justice looks like? Yes, Reverend Plumley.
Yeah, I think it's important to realize this is happening in the International Criminal Court in The Hague. That's, when you grow to when your crimes get to the level of being called war crimes, that's where they're taking. It's an international decision, which is a whole different ball game. Yeah.
Rabbi Afshar.
I'm listening at this point, and I would just want to reiterate, since I have a moment, that to try to find one overall solution to something that has a title, but that has hundreds and thousands of individuals who constitute the whole, WHOLE, and that need to be dealt with in a very individual manner. It is so bizarre to us that we can't even imagine this, but it exists in so many places.
So do you agree that The Hague is the right place, the right forum for this? Or should there be a different place, another place back in the home country, as was suggested by someone?
Well, certainly in South Africa, that did not go to The Hague. It was dealt with in South Africa. Now, the problem here is that The Hague, of course, is a place that people who are committed to war crimes, that's where war crimes are always tried. And there's no other alternative venue. There's a person who's done a thorough study on this case by the name of Fanny Laveau. She wrote The Liability of Child Survivors Under International Criminal Law, published by York University in Toronto.
And 15 seconds.
And she argues that there should be no one under the age of 15 who should ever be prosecuted. But child soldiers between the ages of 15 and 18 can stand. Well, in relationship to the case that we're looking at today, you know, he goes on, Oggood goes on to be a commander in this. So it really presents a totally different type of situation.
I'm sorry, we're out of time. This could go on, and I wish it could. Perhaps another program will come back to this. But for now, there is an important announcement I'd like for you to hear, and then we'll be back for our summary statements.
Thank you, Pastor Lutz. We hope you are enjoying today's program. If you would like to learn more about the American Religious Town Hall, please visit our website at americanreligious.org. That's americanreligious.org. There you can read about the mission and history of the program, learn about the Town Hall estates, and view past programs by clicking the appropriate menu buttons. Each week, Pastor Lutz looks forward to receiving your letters. You may write to him at the address shown on your screen. Send your letters to Pastor Jerry Lutz, American Religious Town Hall Meeting, P.O. Box 180118, Dallas, Texas 75218. That's Pastor Jerry Lutz, American Religious Town Hall Meeting, P.O. Box 180118, Dallas, Texas 75218. Thank you for writing, and thank you for watching. And now, back to you, Pastor Lutz, and today's closing statements.
Thank you and welcome back. We're so very glad that you've joined us again. We're going to go to our summary statements right now. And to do so, let's return to Father Skeldon. You're first.
Again, it was great to be here in a very thoughtful dialogue, I think, on a very, very difficult issue. I think that what we can perhaps take from this notion of child soldiers and trying child soldiers for war crimes, and perhaps what might be important in a local community practicing the principle of subsidiarity, I think we in the West could sort of take that, and perhaps there isn't the one-size-fits-all approach. And concomitant to that, I think that we need to begin in our own society to look at more the notion of punishment, not from a punitive standpoint, but a restorative standpoint.
All right, thank you very much. Reverend Plumley, your summation, please.
Thank you. I am left in this conversation with all sorts of questions. Where do we draw the line? You know, the legal profession is all about drawing lines, and with the thousands upon thousands of children, now adults, who have been forced into this kind of behavior across the African continent and in many other places. How are we going to deal with them? What can we say about grace? What can we say about forgiveness? What can we say about how a community is put back together?
All right, thank you very much. Now, Canon Peterson, your summation, please.
Yes, I personally find this far more complicated because they were Christians. And the question I always think about in a context like this is, what gospel were they reading? What was the gospel? For it seems to me that everything that the Lord's Resistance Army did is opposite of the teachings of Jesus Christ. So what's going on in the church there? And what about restorative justice? And what does restorative justice mean in a situation like that? And that's only a question mark.
All right, thank you very much for your participation today. Yes, and then we go to Dr. Trovell. Your summation, please.
This is indeed perplexing. In fact, I'm really haunted by the fact that this person was a child soldier, inculcated into that lifestyle, then perpetuates it, and that makes it so morally complicated, because I just think of all of us in our own upbringing, we're locked by our own worldviews, and if it's done by force, it makes it even more complicated. And it's hard to sort out responsibility, what that means. So more questions than answers. But.
All right, well, thank you. Thank you today. And then also, Dr. Luxton, your summation, please.
Yeah, I think the Christian element actually makes it even worse on another ground too, because I think if someone feels, oh well, this is what God is saying to do, that actually puts the pressure on someone even more. I don't think this group is the same as just anyone's upbringing influencing the decisions we make. I think there's a point at which the violence, the form of indoctrination becomes such that it crosses a line into something that's a little bit different and requires a little bit of different treatment from just our backgrounds. And the only other thing I would say is I think the reconciliation bit is so vital to this. Justice, the word justice by itself does not go far enough. Whether you add the word restorative to it or add some other words, but there's got to be more than just the word justice, I think.
All right, thank you very much. And now, Rabbi Aufseier, your
Thank you.
summation.
I think that this is an issue that might, at least theoretically, be utilized and be helped through a committee appointed by the United Nations to bring together different countries that have principles to share, and the countries in which perhaps the principles are different, but where all these events occur, and to try to come up with a prospectus that will be helpful to the individual countries in making these choices, which are horrible choices to make and perhaps worse not to make.
All right, thank you very much. And I want to thank each one of you for participating in today's discussion. Very insightful. Yet another program that we may have to come back to as far as the topic is concerned and review more of these interesting insights that you bring to the table. So thank you very much. And thank you for staying by and watching today. For now, the Charter of the American Religious Town Hall provides that Roman Catholics, Protestants, Jews, educators, and others may appear on this program and can declare their beliefs without hesitancy, and the rest of the members of the panel will uphold and guarantee that American right to all who will appear, irrespective of race or creed, so that the rest of the world can see that here in America we believe in civil and religious freedom, and not only in theory, but in reality. So now, friends, until next week at this same time and over the very same channel, or however you've tuned in to watch today, the American Religious Town Hall meeting stands adjourned. And may the God of all of us bless all of you.